Art, culture, literature, and architecture, ancient and medieval India including Kerala. Indian art and culture during the ancient and medieval periods evolved through rich syncretism, regional expressions, and spiritual depth, integrating religion, royalty, and society into aesthetic and symbolic representations. From the earliest cave paintings to monumental temple and Islamic architecture, Indian artistic traditions reflected spiritual cosmology, political ideology, and social values. Literature across languages shaped national identity, while Kerala's cultural evolution mirrored pan-Indian trends with unique local expressions. The earliest form of Indian art can be traced to prehistoric cave paintings, with Bhimbetka, Madhya Pradesh, showcasing Mesolithic depictions of hunting, dancing, and community life. These rock shelters reveal a continuity of visual culture spanning thousands of years. The Indus Valley Civilization, 2517-50 BCE, added sophisticated visual art through seals, terracotta figurines, pottery, and bronze works like the famous dancing girl and priest king sculptures. Though their script remains undeciphered, these artifacts convey a developed aesthetic sense, symbolic thought, and social structure. In the Mauryan period, royal patronage under Ashoka led to monumental stone architecture for the first time. The Ashokan pillars, crowned with animal capitals, especially the lion capital at Sarnath, exemplify refined polish, symbolic precision, and imperial authority. The stupas at Sanchi, Bharhut, and Amravati, with their elaborate railings and gateways, Toranas, mark the beginning of Buddhist sacred architecture. These structures are deeply connected to cosmology and merit-making, evolving in complexity over time. The post-Mauryan and Gupta periods saw classical development in sculpture and temple architecture. The Mathura and Gandhara schools of art flourished under Kushana rule, with Gandhara incorporating Greco-Roman realism and Mathura maintaining indigenous vitality. Gupta art perfected iconography, with serene depictions of Buddha, Vishnu, Shiva, and goddess figures, emphasizing spiritual calm and anatomical grace. The Ajanta caves, 2nd century BCE to 5th century CE, contain exquisite murals with vibrant colors, capturing Jataka tales and Buddhist ideals. Gupta-era temples like the Dashavatara temple at Deoghar and brick temples of Bhitargaon mark the transition to Shikara-based structures and standardized iconography. In South India, the evolution of Dravidian temple architecture under Pallavas, Cholas, and Pandyas reflected local styles, spiritual grandeur, and imperial authority. The Pallava rock-cut caves at Mahabalipuram, the Shore Temple, and later the Brihadeshwara temple at Thanjavur under Rajaraja Chola I represent an architectural culmination with massive vimanas, intricate sculptures, and bronze icons. These temples became economic, educational, and cultural centers. Chola bronzes, such as the iconic Nataraja, combine technical excellence with metaphysical symbolism, encapsulating cosmic rhythm. Kerala's architecture, influenced by climate and timber availability, developed a unique style with sloping roofs, laterite walls, and intricate wood carvings. Temples like Vadakunathan, Thrissur, and Padmanabhaswamy Tiruvananthapuram display a blend of Dravidian and indigenous elements. The Kuthambalam Temple Theatre is a distinctive cultural space for ritual art performances. Art forms like Kathakali, Kudiyattam recognized by UNESCO, and Theyyam evolved as deeply symbolic, integrating dance, storytelling, and ritual into sacred performance. In literature, the Vedas 1500-500 BCE are the earliest literary corpus, consisting of hymns, rituals, and philosophical ideas. The Upanishads introduced metaphysical inquiry, forming the core of Indian philosophical thought. Epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, composed from 500 BCE onwards, shaped Indian culture through themes of dharma, heroism, and cosmic order. The Puranas elaborated mythologies and religious rituals, integrating local deities into mainstream Hinduism. Buddhist literature in Pali, especially the Tripitaka, and Jain texts in Prakrit, like the Agamas, emphasized ethical living and spiritual liberation. The classical Sanskrit tradition, particularly during the Gupta period, saw poets like Kalidasa, Meghaduta, and Hajnanasakuntalam Basa, and Sudraka, establishing literary canons in drama and poetry. Tamil Sangam literature, 300 BCE 300 CE, is a major literary landmark, offering insights into early Dravidian society, heroism, love, and war through works like Eduthagai and Patupatu. Later Tamil Bhakti literature by Alvars and Nayanars laid the foundation for devotional movements. Kerala's literary tradition developed in Sanskrit and Malayalam. Sanskrit scholars like Sankaracharya, 8th century CE, from Kaladi revolutionized Indian philosophy through Advaita Vedanta. Later, Ejuthachan, 16th century, is known as the father of modern Malayalam language and literature, with works like Adhyatma Ramayanam written in Kilapadu form, making spiritual knowledge accessible. Manipravalam, a blend of Malayalam and Sanskrit, was a literary style used in devotional and erotic poetry. The Chakyar Kuthu and Kudiyattam scripts preserve Sanskrit theatre traditions in Kerala temples. Medieval India witnessed the flowering of Bhakti and Sufi literature, emphasizing vernacular languages and emotional devotion. Saints like Kabir, Hindi, Tulsidas, Ramcharit Manas, Mirabai, Rajasthani, Guru Nanak, Punjabi, and Tukaram, Marathi, composed devotional poetry that transcended caste, promoting love and equality. Sufi saints like Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti and Nizamuddin Auliya enriched Indo-Persian culture with mystical poetry and music Qawwali. The dargahs became syncretic spaces of worship and healing. Islamic influence introduced Indo-Islamic architecture, starting with the Delhi Sultanate and perfected under the Mughals. The Qutb Minar, Alai Darwaza, and Tuflik tombs reflect experimentation with arches, domes, and calligraphy. The Mughals, especially under Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb, integrated Persian, Central Asian, and Indian aesthetics. Fatehpur Sikri, Humayun's tomb, Taj Mahal, and Red Fort are architectural masterpieces of harmony, symmetry, and decorative excellence, blending Pietra dura, floral motifs, and Quranic calligraphy. Miniature paintings flourished under Mughal, Rajput, and Deccan courts. The Mughal school, influenced by Persian styles, excelled in realism and court scenes. Rajput paintings, especially in Mewar and Kangra, illustrated Ramayana, Krishna Leela, and romantic themes with bold colors. Kerala developed unique mural painting traditions on temple walls, using natural dyes and mythological themes in vibrant visual storytelling. India's performing arts reached aesthetic heights with Natya Shastra, Bharata's treatise on drama, forming the base of classical dance and theatre. In Kerala, Kathakali, evolved from earlier forms like Ramanattam, dramatized epics through expressive gestures, mudras, elaborate makeup, and percussion music. Mohiniyattam, with graceful movements, developed as a female classical dance form. Traditional music in Kerala followed Sopana style, connected with temple rituals. Previous year questions. Discuss the evolution of temple architecture in South India with examples. CAS 2021. Answer. South Indian temple architecture evolved from rock-cut Pallava caves at Mahabalipuram to structural temples under Cholas like Brihadeshwara. Temples became ritual, economic, and administrative centers. Kerala temples like Vadakunathan adapted to regional ecology with wooden structures and sloping roofs. Examine the contribution of the Bhakti movement to Indian literature. CAS 2019. Answer. The Bhakti movement democratized spiritual expression through vernacular poetry. Saints like Kabir and Mira wrote emotionally charged verses accessible to common people, challenging caste orthodoxy and promoting personal devotion over ritualism. Evaluate the cultural impact of Indo-Islamic architecture during the medieval period. CAS 2020. Answer. Indo-Islamic architecture blended Persian and Indian styles, introducing arches, domes, calligraphy, and symmetry. Monuments like Qutb Minar, Taj Mahal, and Fatehpur Sikri represent aesthetic fusion, spiritual symbolism, and imperial authority, influencing later Indian architecture. Let me know if you're ready to move to modern Indian history, Kerala Renaissance, or any other part of GSI. I'll continue with the same exam-focused quality. You said. Major dynasties, their administrative system. ChatGPT said. Here is a comprehensive and exam-focused lecture on major dynasties and their administrative systems in ancient and medieval India, including Kerala, written in paragraph form, maximally detailed with no tables or wasted space. This is tailored specifically for the CAS officer, junior timescale, trainee. Stream 1 exam and includes 3 relevant previous year questions with answers at the end. Major dynasties and their administrative systems, ancient and medieval India, including Kerala. The political history of India during the ancient and medieval periods was shaped by the rise and fall of powerful dynasties whose administrative systems left long-lasting legacies in governance, revenue, justice, and social organization. Each major dynasty adapted its administration to geographical, economic, and religious contexts, reflecting a blend of central authority and local autonomy. These systems not only defined their political strength but also influenced the socio-economic fabric of Indian civilization. The Mauryan Empire 322–185 BCE, under Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusara, and Ashoka is recognized as the first centralized imperial power in India. Its administrative structure was highly organized, with a strong bureaucracy as described in Kautilya's Arthashastra and Megasthene's Indica. The king was the supreme authority, assisted by a council of ministers Mantraparishad. The empire was divided into provinces, rajas, headed by Kumaras, royal princes, further subdivided into districts and villages. A unique feature was the espionage network, Guptacharas, and a professional standing army under the Senapati. The Mauryan Empire 322–185 BCE, under Chandragupta Maurya, Bindusara, and Ashoka is recognized as the first centralized imperial power in India. Its administrative structure was highly organized, with a strong bureaucracy as described in Kautilya's Arthashastra and Megasthene's Indica. The king was the supreme authority, assisted by a council of ministers Mantraparishad. The empire was divided into provinces, rajas, headed by Kumaras, royal princes, further subdivided into districts and villages. A unique feature was the espionage network, Guptacharas, and a professional standing army under the Senapati. Ashoka introduced a moral bureaucracy by appointing Dhamma Mahamatras to promote ethical conduct and religious tolerance. State control extended to trade, agriculture, weights and measures, and even social morality. Post-Mauryan India saw regional powers like the Satavahanas, whose administration combined Brahmanical influence with pragmatic rule. The king was advised by ministers and supported by feudatories. Their grants of land to Brahmins, Agrahara, and officials led to the growth of semi-autonomous local governance, a trend that would continue in later centuries. In the north, the Kushanas followed a more feudal militaristic administration, blending Central Asian and Indian traditions, using Greek titles like Caesar, and minting coins with their portraits to symbolize sovereignty. The Gupta Empire, circa 320 to 550 CE, refined earlier structures and is noted for a decentralized yet culturally vibrant polity. The king was styled as Maharahadiraja, with a council of ministers Mantran, Mahadandanayaka, Sandavigrahika. Provinces Buktas were governed by Uparikas, further divided into Vishayas, districts, and Gramas, villages, managed by local functionaries. Important inscriptions like the Allahabad pillar of Samudragupta and copper plate grants reveal that the Guptas encouraged local self-governance, especially through village assemblies and guilds, shrenas. They adopted a land grant system, weakening central control over time and contributing to the rise of Indian feudalism. Justice was administered through dharma and royal decrees, with Brahmins playing a significant role. In South India, the Cholas, circa 9th–13th century CE, established one of the most advanced and documented administrative systems in pre-modern India. Their empire was divided into mandalams, provinces, nadus, districts, and Ors, villages, each with defined roles. A major innovation was local self-government in villages, especially in Brahmadaya, Brahmin settlements, and non-Brahmin communities through sabhas and assemblies. The Uttaramerur inscription details election procedures for local committees, variums, reflecting democratic governance, accountability, and social stratification. The central authority controlled military, taxation, and temple affairs, while local bodies handled irrigation, justice, and resource distribution. The Cholas maintained a naval force, supported overseas trade, and institutionalized temple administration through endowments and land grants. In the Deccan, the Rashtrakutas 8th–10th centuries and Chalukyas had similar structures with a strong central monarch, assisted by ministers and provincial governors, Rashtrapatis, Vishayapatis. The feudal practice of granting land to military chiefs, Samantas, led to a layered administrative model. They patronized Kannada and Sanskrit literature and had well-structured military systems with elephant corps and fortresses. Administration relied heavily on land revenue, and the temples played an integral part in local governance. In medieval North India, the Delhi Sultanate 1206–1526 CE brought Islamic political models, characterized by centralization, military slavery, Iqta system, and Persian bureaucracy. The Sultan was the absolute authority, advised by the Diwan-i-Wizrat finance, Diwan-i-Ars military, Diwan-i-Insha correspondence, and Diwan-i-Risalat religious affairs. Provinces Iqtas were governed by Iqtidars who maintained law and order and collected revenue but were under strict control. The Sultanate relied on a standing army, espionage, and intelligence. Justice was administered under Sharia, with qazis and muftis. Alauddin Khilji's market reforms and price control were notable for administrative efficiency. However, frequent succession conflicts and ethnic divisions weakened the central authority. The Mughal Empire 1526–1707 CE refined the Sultanate system and created one of the most sophisticated imperial bureaucracies. The emperor was semi-divine, ruling through Mansabdari and Jagirdari systems. Mansabdars were ranked officials assigned land revenue, Jagir, in return for military and civil service. The Ain-i-Akbari by Abul Fazl gives detailed accounts of Mughal administration. Akbar created a centralized revenue system under Raja Todar Mal, categorizing land based on productivity, zapt system, and standardizing revenue collection. Provinces, subas, were governed by subadars, with further subdivisions, sarkars and parganas. Justice was dual, Sharia for Muslims and local customs for Hindus. The empire supported religious pluralism under Akbar but tilted towards orthodoxy under Aurangzeb, leading to rising discontent. In Kerala, early medieval polity was organized around Sankatam temples, Nadu chiefs, and Brahmin oligarchies. The Kulasakara dynasty, 9th–12th century, ruled from Mahodayapuram and maintained a feudal system with centralized rituals and decentralized political control. Governance was influenced by Brahmin assemblies, temple land grants, and a matrilineal order, Marumakatayam. By the 14th century, the region was fragmented into swarupams, royal houses like the Zamorin of Calicut and the Cochin Raja. The Zamorin had a unique naval policy, controlling the spice trade, while delegating inland administration to chieftains. Power was often negotiated with temples, Brahmins, and merchant guilds like Anduvanam and Managramam. The arrival of the Portuguese and later Europeans altered the power balance, introducing new revenue systems and political alliances. Throughout these periods, land revenue remained the principal source of income. Temples played a dual role, religious and administrative, especially in the south and in Kerala. Decentralization, whether in the form of feudalism, village councils, or religious institutions, coexisted with central military and political authority, shaping India's plural administrative legacy. Previous year questions. Examine the administrative structure of the Mauryan Empire with special reference to Ashoka's Dhamma policy. CAS 2020. Answer. The Mauryan Empire had a centralized bureaucracy with provincial and district officers. Ashoka's Dhamma policy introduced moral governance, appointing Dhamma Mahamatras to spread ethical conduct, protect weaker sections, and maintain religious harmony, reflecting a fusion of political and ethical rule. Discuss the features of the Chola administration and highlight the role of local self-government. CAS 2021. Answer. The Chola administration was decentralized with mandalams, nadus, and villages. Local assemblies like and Sabha managed irrigation, tax, and justice. The Uttaramerur inscription details democratic selection of committee members, showcasing accountability and grassroots governance. Describe the Mughal administrative system with reference to the Mansabdari and Jagirdari systems. CAS 2019. Answer. The Mughal Mansabdari system classified officials based on rank and obligation. Each Mansabdar received a Jagir as salary and had to maintain troops. This system integrated military and revenue administration, although over time it became corrupt and inefficient, contributing to imperial decline. Let me know if you'd like the next lecture on modern Indian history, freedom struggles, or another GSI topic. I'll keep the same format and quality throughout. You said, social, religious, and economic conditions prominent movements ChatGPT. Social, religious, and economic conditions in prominent movements, ancient and medieval India including Kerala. The social, religious, and economic fabric of ancient and medieval India was marked by deep continuities as well as transformational shifts driven by dynastic rule, religious philosophies, trade, agriculture, and popular movements. These periods witnessed the evolution of complex caste hierarchies, stratified gender roles, spiritual pluralism, the expansion of feudal land relations, and the rise of reformist movements that challenged orthodoxy and inequality. Kerala's regional trajectory, while part of the broader Indic pattern, developed distinct institutions such as Matrilini, temple-centered economy, and caste-based ritualism that shaped its unique social order. In ancient India, the Varna system was foundational to social organization, dividing society into Brahmins, priests, Kshatriyas, warriors, Vaishyas, traders, and Shudras, servants. Over time, this evolved into the more rigid and hereditary caste Jati system, which governed occupation, marriage, and social mobility. The Dharma Shastras, particularly Manusmriti, codified social roles and responsibilities, often marginalizing women and lower castes. Patriarchy was entrenched, though early Vedic texts mention learned women like Gargi and Maitreyi. The emergence of urban centers during the Mahajanapada period, 6th century BCE, enabled the growth of artisan and merchant classes, creating new economic and social dynamics. The religious landscape during ancient India was shaped by Vedic rituals, but also transformed by the heterodox philosophies of Buddhism and Jainism, 6th century BCE, which critiqued ritualism, caste hierarchy, and materialism. Gautama Buddha preached the middle path, Madhyama Pratipada, emphasizing ethical living, non-violence, and self-realization. The monastic Sangha became a parallel social institution, open to people from all Varnas. Mahavira's Jainism emphasized extreme asceticism, ahimsa, and non-possession. These faiths contributed to social mobility, women's participation, and literacy through vernacular Pali and Prakrit languages. Their decline later was due to Brahmanical revival and patronage loss, but their impact remained. Economic life in ancient India was primarily agrarian, but urban trade and craft guilds, Shrenas, gained prominence, particularly in Mauryan and Gupta times. The Mauryan state intervened in economic affairs, controlling resources and trade. The Gupta period, while politically fragmented later, saw a flourishing of trade, both internal and maritime, particularly with the Roman Empire. The use of gold coins, trade routes like Uttarapatha and Dakshinapatha, and guild-led production marked economic sophistication. Land grants to Brahmins and temples became common in post-Gupta times, leading to decentralization and feudalization, where land ownership determined socio-political power. In medieval India, society became increasingly hierarchical and feudal, with land ownership and ritual status dictating power. Caste rigidity intensified, and untouchability became more institutionalized. The position of women declined further with practices like purdah, child marriage, and sati, especially among upper castes. At the same time, women from Bhakti and Sufi traditions like Mirabai and Rabia al-Adawiyya challenged these restrictions through spiritual agency. The Islamic conquests from the 12th century brought new social groups like Turks, Afghans, and Persians, and introduced Islamic egalitarianism, although in practice a new ruling elite emerged. The religious scenario was dynamic, witnessing the rise of Bhakti and Sufi movements, which were the most significant reformist currents of medieval India. The Bhakti movement, starting with Alvars and Nayanars in Tamil Nadu, and later spreading through North India with Kabir, Tulsidas, Surdas, Nanak, Chaitanya, and Tukaram, emphasized personal devotion over ritualism, caste equality, and a direct relationship with the divine. These saints used vernacular languages, making spiritual knowledge accessible to the masses, and directly challenged Brahmanical orthodoxy and social exclusion. Kabir's Dohas criticized both Hindu and Muslim orthodoxy, advocating for an inner spiritual path. Guru Nanak laid the foundation of Sikhism, promoting equality, community service, seva, and honest living. Parallel to this, the Sufi movement within Islam emphasized love for God, mysticism, and universal brotherhood. Sufi saints like Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, Nizamuddin Auliya, and Baba Farid established khinkas and dargahs which became centers of spiritual learning, charity, and interfaith dialogue. The Sufis attracted both Hindus and Muslims, thus contributing to syncretic traditions in Indian culture. Their poetry, music, qawwali, and community kitchens, langars, left lasting impressions. Economically, medieval India was characterized by a land-based economy, where zamindars, jagirdars, and temple authorities controlled production and labor. The Delhi Sultanate introduced Ikta system, where land revenue was assigned to nobles in return for service, formalizing a new class of landed elites. Under the Mughals, the Mansabdari Jagirdari system institutionalized revenue extraction through rank and assignment. Raja Todar Mal's Zaft system standardized revenue assessment based on crop yields. These systems increased agricultural production but also led to peasant oppression and frequent rural revolts. Urban centers like Agra, Lahore, and Delhi thrived as commercial and artisan hubs. Indian textiles, spices, and indigo were major exports, linked to global trade via Arab, Portuguese, and Southeast Asian networks. In Kerala, society evolved around caste-based temple-centered Brahmanical order. Nambudiras occupied the apex, controlling land and rituals, followed by Nairs, Azavas, and Pulayas. Matrilineal inheritance Marumakatayam was prominent among Nairs, with property and lineage traced through women. This gave women a distinct status in household and lineage, although temple-centered ritualism still confined their roles. Kerala's Sankatams temple communities became autonomous socio-economic units controlling land, labor, and ritual. Merchant guilds like Managramam and Anjuvanam played significant economic roles. Religious movements in Kerala included Bhakti currents, especially Shaivism and Vaishnavism, and later Sankaras Advaita Vedanta, which promoted monistic philosophy and emphasized internal realization over external rituals. Sankaras' reforms challenged ritual orthodoxy, although his followers often reinforced Brahmanical dominance. With the arrival of Islam and Christianity, Kerala became religiously diverse. Muslim traders settled in coastal areas, and St. Thomas Christians contributed to cultural plurality. Over time, Sufi saints and Christian missionaries facilitated education and social work, creating new institutions and opportunities. Prominent social movements emerged in response to caste oppression and religious exclusion. Saints like Narayana Guru, though more relevant to modern Kerala history, embodied medieval traditions of challenging inequality through spiritual reform. His legacy, though later, reflects the continuity of medieval reformist ethos into modernity. Previous year questions. Explain the contribution of Bhakti and Sufi movements to Indian society. CAST 2021. Answer. Bhakti and Sufi movements promoted religious tolerance, caste and gender inclusivity, and emotional devotion. Saints like Kabir and Nizamuddin Auliya challenged orthodoxy, used local languages, and inspired spiritual democratization, strengthening India's syncretic culture. Describe the socio-economic impact of the Ikta and Jagirdari systems during medieval India. CAS 2020. Answer: the ICTA and Jagradari systems led to administrative decentralization, rural exploitation, and peasant unrest. While enabling revenue collection and military service, these systems created a privileged landed class and often resulted in corruption and inefficiency. Discuss the features of early Indian society and the role of Buddhism in social reform. CAS 2019. Answer: early Indian society was stratified by Varna and Jati. Buddhism challenged this by rejecting caste and advocating ethical living, gender inclusivity, and monastic discipline, creating a more egalitarian alternative to Brahmanical orthodoxy. Let me know when you're ready for the next section, Modern Indian History, Kerala Renaissance, or any other part of GSI, and I'll continue in the same comprehensive format. Modern Indian History, 18th century to present, from decline to freedom and beyond. Modern Indian history from the 18th century onward is a chronicle of decline, resistance, awakening, and transformation. It begins with the collapse of the Mughal Empire, the rise of regional powers, and the slow but systematic expansion of British colonial rule, culminating in India's independence in 1947 and its post-colonial transformation. The period is marked by complex interplays of colonial exploitation, social reforms, economic restructuring, nationalist movements, and the birth of modern democratic India. The 18th century saw the fragmentation of centralized Mughal authority following Aurangzeb's death, 1707. This led to the rise of regional powers like the Marathas, Sikhs, Rajputs, Mysore under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, and the Nawabs of Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad. However, these powers lacked unity, and their internal conflicts made them vulnerable to British intervention. The British East India Company. It begins with the collapse of the Mughal Empire, the rise of regional powers, and the slow but systematic expansion of British colonial rule, culminating in India's independence in 1947 and its post-colonial transformation. The period is marked by complex interplays of colonial exploitation, social reforms, economic restructuring, nationalist movements, and the birth of modern democratic India. The 18th century saw the fragmentation of centralized Mughal authority following Aurangzeb's death, 1707. This led to the rise of regional powers like the Marathas, Sikhs, Rajputs, Mysore under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, and the Nawabs of Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad. However, these powers lacked unity, and their internal conflicts made them vulnerable to British intervention. The British East India Company, initially a trading enterprise, exploited this political vacuum through military superiority, strategic alliances, and economic control, beginning with the decisive Battle of Plassey, 1757, and later the Battle of Buxar, 1764, securing Bengal's Diwani rights, revenue collection. Under the company rule, 1757-1858, India's political structure was reshaped. Lord Cornwallis, Wellesley, Hastings, and others introduced administrative, judicial, and revenue reforms such as the permanent settlement, Ryotwari, and Mahalwari systems, which led to widespread rural distress and dispossession. The doctrine of lapse under Lord Dalhousie, aggressive annexations, and cultural insensitivity, e.g., outlawing sati, imposing English education, further alienated Indians, especially princely states and traditional elites. This culminated in the Revolt of 1857, India's first major nationalist uprising, led by figures like Rani Lakshmibai, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Tanshah Tope, and Nana Sahib. Although it was brutally suppressed, it marked the end of company rule and led to direct crown rule, British Raj, 1858-1947, through the Government of India Act 1858. The British Raj saw a more bureaucratic and centralized administration, with viceroys and secretariats, but also increased racial segregation and economic exploitation. Drain of wealth theory, articulated by Dadabhai Nauroji, highlighted how British policies like deindustrialization, land revenue pressures, and unfavorable trade systematically impoverished India. Famines, e.g., 1876-78, 1899, and Bengal 1943, exposed the Raj's callousness. Yet, colonialism also unintentionally laid foundations for Indian unity through railways, telegraphs, English education, and pan-Indian legal systems. Parallelly, the social and religious reform movements, Brahmo Samaj, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Arya Samaj, Dayananda Saraswati, Aligarh movement, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Ramakrishna Mission, Swami Vivekananda, and Theosophical Society, Annie Besant, sought to modernize society, remove superstitions, challenge caste and gender inequalities, and respond to Western critiques of Indian culture. These reforms spurred the Indian Renaissance, merging tradition with rationality and planting the seeds of nationalism. The rise of nationalism became visible in the formation of the Indian National Congress, 1885. Initially moderate, led by Gokhale and Nauroji, it petitioned for reforms and inclusion. The partition of Bengal, 1905, by Lord Curzon sparked mass opposition in the Swadeshi movement, which promoted boycotting British goods and self-reliance. The early 20th century witnessed the growth of extremist nationalism led by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal, advocating assertive political methods and national pride. Revolutionary movements like Anushilin Samiti and Ghadar Party emerged, while Muslim League 1906 began asserting Muslim interests. World War I, 1914-18, catalyzed further mobilization. The Rowlatt Act, 1919, and Jallianwala Bagh massacre intensified resentment. Mahatma Gandhi, emerging as the undisputed leader, transformed the movement through nonviolent mass struggle, launching Non-Cooperation Movement, 1920-22, Civil Disobedience, 1930-34, and Quit India Movement, 1942. His philosophy of Satyagraha, Ahimsa, and Sarvodaya united peasants, women, workers, and youth. Other prominent leaders included Subhas Chandra Bose, who formed the Indian National Army, and Bhagat Singh, who symbolized revolutionary martyrdom. The Simon Commission, 1927, Round Table Conferences, and Government of India Act 1935 attempted to pacify Indians with Other prominent leaders included Subhas Chandra Bose, who formed the Indian National Army, and Bhagat Singh, who symbolized revolutionary martyrdom. The Simon Commission, 1927, Round Table Conferences, and Government of India Act 1935 attempted to pacify Indians with limited reforms, but they failed to satisfy aspirations for full sovereignty. Communal tensions, often encouraged by divide and rule policies, widened, leading to the tragic partition. The Lahore Resolution 1940 by the Muslim League demanded Pakistan. Despite Gandhi's efforts, India was partitioned on August 15, 1947, creating India and Pakistan. The Mountbatten Plan and Indian Independence Act 1947 formalized this, but at the cost of communal violence, mass migrations, and the assassination of Gandhi 1948. Post-independence, India became a republic in 1950 under the constitution framed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The Nehruvian era focused on planned economy, non-alignment, scientific temper, and institution building. Land reforms, community development, and industrialization were initiated, though with limited success in eradicating poverty and caste discrimination. Green Revolution, Emergency 1975-77, Economic Liberalization, 1991, Coalition Politics, and Technological Advancement shaped modern India. Despite challenges, India emerged as the world's largest democracy with vibrant institutions and a pluralistic society. Previous year questions. Evaluate the role of social and religious reform movements in the growth of Indian nationalism. CAS 2021. Answer. Reform movements challenged orthodoxy, casteism, and gender discrimination while embracing rationality and cultural pride. Leaders like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Swami Vivekananda redefined Indian identity, building confidence against colonial stereotypes, thus nurturing the roots of Indian nationalism. Discuss the impact of the British economic policies on Indian agriculture and industry. CAS 2020. Answer. British land revenue systems led to rural indebtedness and famines. Traditional industries were destroyed due to import of British goods, leading to deindustrialization and unemployment. India became an exporter of raw materials and a market for British products, resulting in economic dependency. Trace the evolution of the Indian national movement from moderate to mass movement. CAS 2019. Answer. Starting with moderate petitions 1885-1905, nationalism evolved into assertive resistance through the extremists, then mass mobilization under Gandhi from 1920. Movements like non-cooperation and Quit India involved peasants, women, and students, turning nationalism into a pan-Indian struggle. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Freedom struggle, different phases and role of eminent leaders, contributions from Kerala, or any other. Significant events in modern Indian history, 18th century to present. The trajectory of modern Indian history is punctuated by landmark events that reshaped the political, social, and economic landscape of the subcontinent. The modern era began with the decline of the Mughal Empire and the growing dominance of the British East India Company, whose expansion was consolidated through pivotal events like the Battle of Plassey, 1757, and Battle of Buxar, 1764. These marked the beginning of British political supremacy. The Regulating Act of 1773, Pitt's India Act, 1784, and Charter Acts restructured colonial administration and brought India increasingly under British Parliament's control. A major turning point was the Revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of Indian Independence. Triggered by grievances related to the Enfield rifle, it soon escalated into a widespread uprising involving sepoys, rulers, and peasants. Though it failed due to poor coordination and lack of central leadership, it led to the end of East India Company rule and the beginning of direct British Crown rule 1858. The Indian Councils Act of 1861 and 1892 attempted limited Indian representation, but the Ilbert Bill controversy 1883 revealed racial biases, deepening Indian resentment. The formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885 was a seminal moment, marking the institutionalization of Indian political assertion. The partition of Bengal in 1905 by Lord Curzon, justified as administrative reform, was widely opposed and gave rise to the Swadeshi and boycott movements. This period also witnessed the ideological split between moderates and extremists during the Surat Session, 1907. The rise of revolutionary nationalism, exemplified by organizations like Anushilan Samiti, further radicalized Indian youth. The World War I era, 1914-1918, was crucial. While India supported Britain expecting political concessions, the betrayal came through the Rowlatt Act, 1919, which allowed detention without trial. This led to nationwide outrage, culminating in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, April 13, 1919, where General Dyer's troops killed hundreds of unarmed civilians. This brutality transformed the national psyche, intensifying anti-British sentiment. The Non-Cooperation Movement, 1920-1922, led by Mahatma Gandhi, was India's first mass civil disobedience campaign, involving students, lawyers, peasants, and workers. Though suspended after the Chori Chora incident, it marked the start of mass politics. The 1930s were shaped by the civil disobedience movement, 1930-1934, launched following the Salt March to Dandi. This act of defiance against the salt tax galvanized the masses. The movement was partially suspended after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, 1931, and was followed by the Round Table Conferences, which failed to satisfy Indian aspirations. Meanwhile, revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, and Sukhdev reignited the flame of militant nationalism through acts like the Central Legislative Assembly bombing, 1929, and Lahore conspiracy case. A pivotal event was the Government of India Act, 1935, the most comprehensive colonial law, which provided provincial autonomy and proposed a federal structure. Elections under this act in 1937 saw Congress forming ministries in several provinces. However, World War II, 1939-1945, altered the scenario. Britain declared India's involvement without consulting Indian leaders, prompting Congress to resign from ministries. In response, Subhas Chandra Bose, who had differences with Gandhi, organized the Indian National Army (INA) with Japanese support to fight colonial rule militarily. The INA trials, Red Fort, 1945, stirred nationalist passion. The Quit India Movement, 1942, was launched during World War II, demanding immediate British withdrawal. It saw widespread violence, arrests, and underground resistance. Meanwhile, communal divisions deepened, with the Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, demanding Pakistan. Post-war fatigue, economic crisis, and global pressure pushed the British towards decolonization. The Cabinet Mission Plan 1946 failed, and the country descended into communal riots. India achieved independence on August 15, 1947, through the Mountbatten Plan, but it was accompanied by the painful partition of the country into India and Pakistan. The Indian Independence Act 1947 legally ended British rule. The tragedy of communal violence, refugee crises, and the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi 1948 marked the birth of modern India. Post-independence, the adoption of the Constitution in 1950 marked a new beginning under a sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic. The period saw events like land reforms, five-year plans, linguistic reorganization of states 1956, emergency 1975-77, and economic liberalization 1991. The nuclear tests 1974, 1998, Pokhran II, Cargo War 1999, Right to Information Act 2005, and GST implementation 2017 are all significant events shaping the modern Indian state. Previous year questions. Discuss the significance of the non-cooperation movement in the Indian freedom struggle. CAS 2020. Answer. The non-cooperation movement was the first mass protest against British rule involving diverse social classes. It boycotted British institutions, promoted Swadeshi, and set the stage for future mass movements, despite being called off after the Chauri Chaura incident. Examine the impact of World War II on the Indian national movement. CAS 2021. Answer. World War II intensified India's demand for independence. Britain's unilateral decision to involve India without consultation angered leaders. The Quit India movement erupted, and Subhas Chandra Bose leveraged the war to form the INA. Post-war, Britain's weakened position hastened decolonization. Explain the consequences of the partition of India in 1947. CAS 2019. Answer. Partition led to mass violence, displacement of over 12 million people, communal riots, economic dislocation, and long-term India-Pakistan hostility. It also caused emotional trauma and disrupted centuries-old communities, complicating nation-building efforts. Ready for the next part? I can cover freedom struggle, different phases and eminent leaders, or Kerala's role. Significant personalities and key issues in modern Indian history. The modern Indian struggle for independence and social reform was largely shaped by several towering personalities who, through their leadership, vision, and action, propelled the nation's freedom movement and social transformation. From the 18th century, when the subcontinent was under the British East India Company, to the 20th century independence struggle, these individuals played crucial roles in addressing the political, social, and economic issues of their times. Mahatma Gandhi was undoubtedly the most significant figure in modern Indian history. A man of deep moral conviction, his ideology of ahimsa, non-violence, and satyagraha, truth force, revolutionized the Indian struggle against colonial rule. Gandhi's role in non-cooperation movement 1920, civil disobedience movement 1930, and Quit India movement 1942 established him as the foremost leader of the Indian independence struggle. His principles of peaceful resistance had a profound influence on global movements for civil rights and freedom. Gandhi's leadership was not limited to political resistance but also included significant efforts towards social reforms, including the eradication of untouchability, the promotion of khadi, and advocacy for women's rights. Another monumental personality in the independence movement was Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. Nehru's vision of a modern, secular, and democratic India was reflected in his emphasis on industrialization, scientific progress, and social equality. Nehru also laid the foundation for India's foreign policy of non-alignment and played a pivotal role in nation-building after independence. His contributions extended to the reorganization of states, the establishment of public sector enterprises, and the promotion of education through the Indian Institutes of Technology (IITs). Subhas Chandra Bose, a charismatic leader, took a different route to India's freedom. His leadership of the Indian National Army (INA) and his alliance with the Axis powers during World War II marked his commitment to achieving independence by all means necessary. Despite his differences with Gandhi and the Congress leadership, his call for armed resistance against the British left an indelible mark on the nationalist struggle. His "Give me blood, and I will give you freedom" slogan became a rallying cry for many Indians who believed that the country's freedom could not be achieved through nonviolent means alone. The contributions of B.R. Ambedkar in modern Indian history are unparalleled, particularly regarding the issues of social justice and Dalit rights. As the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, Ambedkar's vision of a secular, democratic, and egalitarian society was integral to India's post-independence development. His tireless efforts to ensure the rights of the untouchables and his advocacy for social reforms made him a crucial figure in the Indian social and political landscape. Ambedkar's stance on social issues, particularly his fight against caste-based discrimination, culminated in the formation of the Independent Labour Party and later the Republican Party of India. Another key personality was Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, known as the Iron Man of India. Patel's role in integration of princely states into the Indian Union post-independence was a monumental task. His leadership in the Bardoli Satyagraha 1928, where he led peasants in their fight against land revenue hikes, made him one of the most prominent leaders of the time. His consolidation of India's political boundaries after independence, and his handling of difficult situations like the Nizam of Hyderabad and Junagadh, cemented his status as one of the principal architects of modern India. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a nationalist leader and freedom fighter, was one of the first to speak of India's complete independence and not just reforms. Tilak's famous slogan, "Swaraj is my birthright and I will have it," galvanized millions of Indians to demand full self-rule. His role in the Home Rule movement and his leadership in the Indian National Congress during its more radical phase marked a shift towards more assertive resistance against British rule. Lala Lajpat Rai, a prominent leader during the freedom struggle, was known for his significant contributions to the Punjab politics and the non-cooperation movement. His role in raising public awareness about the oppressive nature of British rule, particularly through his leadership in the Simon Commission protests 1928, where he succumbed to police violence, made him a martyr for the nationalist cause. Rabindranath Tagore, a literary giant and philosopher, contributed significantly to India's cultural renaissance. His works, including Gitanjali, which earned him the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, reflect a deep understanding of the socio-political issues of his time. Tagore was not just a poet but also a social reformer, who advocated for the interdependence of all nations, peace, and human rights. Important issues. Several issues took center stage during India's colonial history and freedom struggle. Economic exploitation. The economic policies of the British drained India's wealth, leading to the deindustrialization of its native industries and a sharp decline in agricultural productivity. The drain of wealth theory formulated by Dadabhai Naoroji brought attention to the exploitation of India's resources for the benefit of Britain. Social reforms. The issue of untouchability, the position of women, and child marriage became major social issues. Reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and Swami Vivekananda pushed for religious tolerance, women's education, and social reforms. Gandhi also focused on the eradication of untouchability, leading the Harijan movement. Communalism and partition. One of the most divisive issues during India's struggle for independence was the communal divide between Hindus and Muslims, which was exacerbated by the British divide and rule policies. The Muslim League's demand for Pakistan, represented through the Lahore Resolution of 1940, culminated in the partition of India, 1947, leading to one of the largest mass migrations and communal violence in history. Language and identity. The issue of linguistic and cultural identity gained prominence after independence, leading to the reorganization of states on linguistic lines. The official language issue was also significant, with heated debates around whether Hindi or English should be the national language. Civil rights and democracy. The crafting of India's constitution, under Ambedkar's leadership, was a critical response to the challenges posed by India's diverse population and the legacy of colonial oppression. Issues like fundamental rights, reservations, and secularism have remained integral to India's democracy. Previous year questions. Explain the role of Mahatma Gandhi in the Indian freedom movement. CAS 2021. Answer. Gandhi's nonviolent resistance through Satyagraha and Ahimsa galvanized mass support against British rule. His leadership in movements like non-cooperation, civil disobedience, and Quit India shaped the Indian independence struggle, emphasizing self-reliance, non-violence, and social harmony. Analyze the contributions of Subhas Chandra Bose in the Indian freedom struggle. CAS 2020. Answer. Subhas Chandra Bose led the Indian National Army (INA) and sought foreign support for India's independence. His alliance with Japan during World War II, along with his radical methods and motto, "Give me blood, I will give you freedom," made him a prominent and controversial figure in the nationalist movement. Discuss the role of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in shaping modern India. CAS 2019. Answer. Ambedkar's leadership in drafting the Indian Constitution, his fight for Dalit rights, and his emphasis on social justice laid the foundation for India's democratic and secular ethos. His efforts to abolish untouchability and promote social reforms were integral to shaping India's social policies. This concludes a deep dive into significant personalities and issues that defined modern India. Let me know if you'd like to continue with more topics such as freedom struggle phases, post-independence developments, or anything else specific for your preparation. Here is a high-quality, full India, struggle for independence. The Indian struggle for independence was not a linear, singular movement but an evolving resistance that spanned over 2 centuries, integrating political, economic, social, and ideological dimensions. It began subtly with opposition to the economic exploitation under British colonialism and gradually grew into a full-fledged nationalist movement that involved the masses, elites, revolutionaries, reformers, workers, peasants, students, and women, culminating in August 15, 1947, when India became free. The initial resistance began with localized uprisings like the Sanyasi Fakir rebellions, Palagar revolts, and Vellore Mutiny 1806 driven by socio-economic grievances. However, the first pan-Indian armed challenge came with the revolt of 1857, sparked by the introduction of greased cartridges to sepoys but rooted in deeper issues like economic hardship, land annexation, doctrine of lapse, disrespect to Indian traditions, and racial discrimination. Though it failed, it shook British confidence and led to the end of East India Company rule, beginning Crown rule in 1858. The post-1857 period witnessed a new form of struggle, moderate constitutional agitation. The Indian National Congress (INC) was formed in 1885 under the guidance of A. L. Hume, representing the educated elite who demanded reforms, not freedom. Leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and M. G. Ranade promoted economic critique of colonialism, e.g., drain theory, and demanded Indianization of services, expansion of legislative councils, and civil rights. However, their moderate petitions failed to impress the British. By the late 19th and early 20th century, the failure of moderate methods gave rise to the extremist phase led by Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal, the Lal Bal Pal trio. Their aggressive slogan, "Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it," an emphasis on boycott, Swadeshi, and passive resistance were catalyzed by events like the partition of Bengal 1905 by Lord Curzon. This triggered the Swadeshi movement, a turning point where the masses first participated on a large scale. The rising spirit of nationalism took a radical turn with revolutionary groups like Anashulan Samiti and Jugantar in Bengal, and Ghadar Party abroad. These groups carried out assassinations, bombings, and armed resistance, believing that only force could end British rule. However, repression, arrests, and the lack of mass support weakened these movements. The First World War 1914-1918 further radicalized Indian politics. While India supported Britain in the war hoping for political concessions, betrayal came with the Rowlatt Act 1919 that allowed arrest without trial. The Jallianwala Bagh Massacre 1919, where British troops under General Dyer killed over 400 peaceful protesters in Amritsar, shocked the nation and hardened nationalist sentiment. This period also marked the emergence of Mahatma Gandhi, who transformed Indian politics by bringing nonviolence, truth, and mass participation to the forefront. His Champaran 1917 and Kheda 1918 Satyagrahas proved that nonviolent resistance could be a powerful tool. The Non-Cooperation Movement 1920-22 was Gandhi's first nationwide movement, where Indians boycotted schools, titles, courts, and foreign goods. Though suspended after the Chauri Chaura incident, it awakened national consciousness. The 1920s also saw the rise of communal politics, particularly after the Khilafat movement, and internal disagreements between Congress and other groups. The Swarajists, led by Motilal Nehru and C.R. Das, entered councils to obstruct British governance, while revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, and Surya Sen continued underground resistance, culminating in events like the Lahore conspiracy case and Chittagong Armory raid, 1930. The civil disobedience movement 1930-34 began with Gandhi's Salt March to Dandi and escalated into massive defiance, salt production, foreign cloth boycott, tax refusal. The British responded with brutal repression and mass arrests. Although the Gandhi-Irwin Pact 1931 led to a brief truce, the Round Table conferences in London failed, revealing British reluctance to grant real autonomy. The 1935 Government of India Act introduced provincial autonomy, under which Congress formed governments in many provinces after the 1937 elections, demonstrating administrative ability. However, in 1939, the British dragged India into World War II without consulting Indian leaders, triggering mass protests and Congress resignations. In 1942, Gandhi launched the final mass uprising, the Quit India movement. With the slogan, "Do or die," it demanded immediate British withdrawal. The British arrested all Congress leaders, but the movement spread underground through students, workers, and revolutionaries, though brutally suppressed. Simultaneously, Subhas Chandra Bose, who broke from Congress due to ideological differences, formed the Indian National Army (INA) with Japanese aid. His military efforts in the INA trials 1945 ignited nationalist fervor, forcing the British to rethink. Post-war, Britain's economy was shattered, and pressure from international politics, Indian resistance, and the naval mutiny 1946 compelled them to decolonize. The Cabinet Mission Plan 1946 failed due to Congress League disagreement. The Mountbatten Plan 1947 proposed partition, which Congress reluctantly accepted to avoid civil war. The Indian Independence Act was passed, and on August 15, 1947, India became free. However, independence came with partition, communal violence, displacement of millions, and the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi in January 1948. Nevertheless, the struggle for freedom remains a testimony to India's resilience and diverse strategies of resistance: moderate petitioning, extremist agitation, revolutionary action, Gandhian non-violence, constitutional reforms, and armed resistance. Previous year CAS questions. What were the main reasons for the failure of the Revolt of 1857? CAS 2018. Answer: the Revolt of 1857 failed due to lack of central leadership, poor coordination, limited geographical spread, superior British military technology, betrayal by some Indian rulers, and absence of a cohesive national ideology. Analyze the significance of the Salt Satyagraha in the Indian freedom struggle. CAS 2020. Answer: the Salt Satyagraha was a symbolic yet powerful act of civil disobedience that mobilized the masses, broke the fear of the British government, and highlighted India's demand for complete independence to the world. It re-established Gandhi's leadership and shook British confidence. Discuss the causes and impact of the Quit India movement. CAS 2021. Answer: causes included frustration over British wartime policies, failure of the Cripps mission, and growing nationalist sentiment. The movement showed Indian resolve for immediate independence, though it was suppressed, and it marked the beginning of the end of British rule. Let me know when you're ready for the next lecture. I'll proceed with social and religious reform movements in the 19th century. The 19th century in India was marked by powerful churning of ideas and a determined effort to reform the deeply entrenched social evils and religious rigidity that had developed over centuries. This period, catalyzed by colonial modernity, exposure to Western liberal thought, Christian missionary critiques, and a growing Indian middle class, witnessed a wide spectrum of reform movements that sought to cleanse and revive Indian society and religion, while addressing the oppressive structures of caste, gender, superstition, child marriage, and illiteracy. The British rule acted as a paradoxical influence. It exploited India economically and racially oppressed Indians, yet also inadvertently opened up the country to modern education, science, rationalism, and legal reform. Indians, especially the English-educated elite, absorbed these values and began questioning the irrationalities in their own traditions. The earliest reform initiative came through Raja Ram Mohan Roy, often called the father of modern India. Deeply influenced by monotheism and reason, he opposed idol worship, casteism, sati, polygamy, and purdah. He founded the Atmaya Sabha 1815 and later the Brahmo Samaj 1828 in Bengal. The Brahmo Samaj advocated monotheism, rejection of idol worship, equal rights for women, and modern education. Roy's efforts led to the abolition of sati in 1829 under Lord William Bentinck. He also promoted Western education and founded English schools. His thought bridged tradition and modernity, emphasizing ethical universalism. Later, Debendranath Tagore and Keshav Chandra Sen carried the Brahmo legacy forward. However, ideological splits emerged: Adi Brahmo Samaj orthodox and Sadharan Brahmo Samaj liberal, inclusive. Their impact was mostly in Bengal but intellectually vital for pan-India reform. In Maharashtra, Jyotiba Phule emerged as a radical social reformer. He launched the Satyashodak Samaj 1873 to fight Brahminical dominance, caste-based oppression, and promote women's education. He and his wife Savitribai Phule opened the first school for girls in Pune 1848. He attacked religious orthodoxy, untouchability, and patriarchy, and sought to empower the lower castes through education and social equality. He is considered the pioneer of anti-caste ideology in India. Swami Dayananda Saraswati, the founder. The earliest reform initiative came through Raja Ram Mohan Roy, often called the father of modern India. Deeply influenced by monotheism and reason, he opposed idol worship, casteism, sati, polygamy, and purdah. He founded the Atmaya Sabha 1815 and later the Brahmo Samaj 1828 in Bengal. The Brahmo Samaj advocated monotheism, rejection of idol worship, equal rights for women, and modern education. Roy's efforts led to the abolition of sati in 1829 under Lord William Bentinck. He also promoted Western education and founded English schools. His thought bridged tradition and modernity, emphasizing ethical universalism. Later, Debendranath Tagore and Keshav Chandra Sen carried the Brahmo legacy forward. However, ideological splits emerged. Adi Brahmo Samaj orthodox and Sadharan Brahmo Samaj liberal, inclusive. Their impact was mostly in Bengal but intellectually vital for pan-India reform. In Maharashtra, Jyotiba Phule emerged as a radical social reformer. He launched the Satyashodak Samaj 1873 to fight Brahmanical dominance, caste-based oppression, and promote women's education. He and his wife Savitribai Phule opened the first school for girls in Pune 1848. He attacked religious orthodoxy, untouchability, and patriarchy, and sought to empower the lower castes through education and social equality. He is considered the pioneer of anti-caste ideology in India. Swami Dayananda Saraswati, the founder of Arya Samaj 1875, was another powerful voice. He advocated a return to the Vedas Vedanta-based monotheism while denouncing idol worship, child marriage, caste discrimination, animal sacrifice, and superstitious rituals. He called for sati reconversion to Hinduism, supported widow remarriage, women's education, and national unity. The Arya Samaj became extremely influential in North India and inspired nationalist and revivalist fervor. In South India, reform came through figures like Sri Narayana Guru, who campaigned for social equality and spiritual upliftment among the oppressed Azava community. His motto, one caste, one religion, one God for mankind, challenged the Brahmanical monopoly over spirituality. His emphasis on education, unity, and self-purification inspired later political mobilizations like the SNDP Yogam and set the foundation for Kerala's social revolution. Similarly, Periyar E.V. Ramasamy in Tamil Nadu launched the self-respect movement, 1925, attacking caste hierarchy, Brahmanism, patriarchy, and promoting atheism and rational thought. Though more politically radical, his roots were in the earlier reform ethos of breaking caste and religious orthodoxy. Islamic reform movements too emerged in response to the perceived decline of the Muslim community post-1857. Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, founder of Aligarh movement and Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, 1875, later AMU, promoted modern scientific education, loyalty to the British, and Muslim socio-economic upliftment. He opposed orthodoxy, urged Muslims to adopt English education, and argued for Hindu-Muslim unity, though he later drifted toward Muslim distinctiveness. Deoband movement 1866, on the other hand, emphasized religious education and was more traditionalist, while Wahhabi movement, though earlier, sought a puritanical Islamic revival. The Ahmadiyya movement, founded by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, offered a rationalist interpretation of Islam, condemned jihad and Similarly, Periyar E.V. Ramasamy in Tamil Nadu launched the self-respect movement, 1925, attacking caste hierarchy, Brahmanism, patriarchy, and promoting atheism and rational thought. Though more politically radical, his roots were in the earlier reform ethos of breaking caste and religious orthodoxy. Islamic reform movements too emerged in response to the perceived decline of the Muslim community post-1857. Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, founder of Aligarh movement and Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, 1875, later AMU, promoted modern scientific education, loyalty to the British, and Muslim socio-economic upliftment. He opposed orthodoxy, urged Muslims to adopt English education, and argued for Hindu-Muslim unity, though he later drifted toward Muslim distinctiveness. Deoband movement 1866, on the other hand, emphasized religious education and was more traditionalist, while Wahhabi movement, though earlier, sought a puritanical Islamic revival. The Ahmadiyya movement, founded by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, offered a rationalist interpretation of Islam, condemned jihad in modern times, and promoted peaceful coexistence. Sikh reform came through the Singh Sabha movement 1873, which aimed to purify Sikhism, remove Hindu influences, promote education and social reform, and revive the Khalsa identity. It laid the foundation for the Akali movement and reform in Gurudwara administration. Christian converts and missionaries, especially in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, played a key role in education, gender equality, and abolition of caste disabilities, while native Christian reformers like K.T. Paul focused on interfaith harmony and national integration. The Theosophical Society, founded in New York but established in India by Annie Besant, revived interest in Hindu philosophy, Vedanta, and Indian culture, while promoting spirituality over materialism. It influenced nationalist thinkers and contributed to Home Rule demand later. Common themes across these movements included attack on social evils like sati, child marriage, untouchability, and caste discrimination. Advocacy of women's rights, including education, widow remarriage, and abolition of polygamy. Promotion of modern education, especially in English and science. Return to pure scriptures and ethical core of religions. Rationalism and humanism over ritualism and superstition. Gradual evolution of nationalism from cultural to political awakening. These reform movements played a foundational role in nation building, as they not only democratized society but also prepared the ideological ground for mass political mobilization in the 20th century. They triggered identity consciousness, assertion of dignity by oppressed communities, and laid the cultural groundwork for Indian nationalism. Previous year CAS questions. Discuss the role of Raja Ram Mohan Roy in the social reform movements of the 19th century. CAS 2018. Answer. Raja Ram Mohan Roy led the fight against sati, child marriage, and casteism. He founded Brahmo Samaj to promote monotheism, women's rights, and rational social order. His work led to the abolition of sati and inspired future reformers. Examine the objectives and achievements of the Arya Samaj. CAS 2021. Answer. Arya Samaj, founded by Swami Dayananda Saraswati, sought to purify Hinduism based on Vedic principles. It opposed idol worship, casteism, and superstitions, supported women's education, widow remarriage, and social unity. It became a powerful force for reform in North India. Write a note on the contribution of Jyotiba Phule to social reform. Caste 2019. Answer. Phule founded Satyashodak Samaj to fight caste oppression. He opened schools for girls and Dalits, promoted women's rights, and challenged Brahminical domination. His work laid the foundation for anti-caste and social justice movements in modern India. Let me know when you're ready for the next lecture. I'll be Social and religious reform movements in the 20th century. The 20th century in India witnessed a transformation in the character and direction of social and religious reform movements, shaped profoundly by the rising tide of nationalism, anti-colonial struggle, Gandhian philosophy, education, and grassroots mobilization. Unlike the 19th century, where reforms were initiated mainly by the Western educated elite, the 20th century saw the emergence of mass-based, community-rooted movements focused on caste equality, gender justice, religious dignity, and cultural revival, often intersecting with the national freedom movement. One of the most defining figures of this era was Mahatma Gandhi, who made social reform central to his political agenda. His campaign against untouchability, symbolized through the Harijan Sevak saying, 1932, challenged deep-seated caste discrimination. Gandhi regarded removal of untouchability as a moral prerequisite for Swaraj and promoted the constructive program which included spinning, sanitation, village upliftment, khadi promotion, and women's empowerment. His emphasis on truth, satya, and non-violence, ahimsa, was not merely political but deeply ethical, seeking the spiritual regeneration of Indian society. Gandhi toured villages extensively, lived among Dalits, and insisted on their inclusion in temples and social spaces, setting an example of grassroots social reform. Parallel to Gandhi, B.R. Ambedkar emerged as the most radical and structurally focused reformer of the 20th century. Unlike Gandhi, who sought reform within Hinduism, Ambedkar denounced the caste system as inherently oppressive and campaigned for legal, political, and religious emancipation of the depressed classes Dalits. He organized movements like the Mahad Satyagraha 1927 for water rights, Kalaram Temple Entry 1930, and demanded separate electorates for Dalits in the Pune Pact 1932. His sharp critique of Hindu scriptures that sanctioned caste hierarchy culminated in his historic conversion to Buddhism 1956 with millions of followers, marking a religious revolution and assertion of dignity. Ambedkar's annihilation of caste remains one of the most forceful indictments of social inequality in Indian history. In South India, the self-respect movement led by Periyar E. V. Ramasamy, from 1925, was a powerful socio-political challenge to Brahminical hegemony, caste oppression, patriarchy, and religious orthodoxy. Periyar promoted rationalism, atheism, gender equality, and a fierce assertion of Dravidian identity. He advocated for intercaste marriages, abolition of Sanskrit and Hindu rituals, and rejection of oppressive texts like Manusmriti. His influence led to reservation policies, social justice laws, and cultural transformation in Tamil Nadu, shaping post-independence India's discourse on affirmative action and secularism. In Kerala, the social reform legacy continued through movements inspired by Sri Narayana Guru, who had already laid the foundation in the 19th century. His disciple, T.K. Madhavan, led the Vaikom Satyagraha 1924-25 for temple entry rights of lower castes, supported by Gandhi. It was a nonviolent agitation that became a model for civil rights movements. The Guruvayur Satyagraha 1931-32 further deepened this struggle, leading to the landmark temple entry proclamation of Travancore 1936, a watershed in the assertion of religious equality and social justice. The SNDP Yogam and youth organizations like Yogakshema Sabha emerged as platforms for asserting dignity, education, and spiritual rights for backward communities. The 20th century also saw reform movements within Islam, which, while often community-specific, engaged with broader issues of modernization, education, and women's rights. Leaders like Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, a devout Muslim and a committed nationalist, advocated for interfaith unity, rational education, and the rejection of communal politics. The Jamaat-e-Islami and Tablighi Jamaat focused on spiritual revival, though they remained insulated from progressive reform. However, Muslim women's organizations began voicing demands for education, veiling rights, inheritance reforms, and equal treatment under Islamic law, a discourse that would mature post-independence into the demand for a uniform civil code. Among Sikhs, the Gurdwara reform movement 1920s aimed to liberate Sikh shrines from corrupt Mahants custodians supported by the British. It culminated in the formation of the Shiromani Gurdwara Parbandhik Committee (SGPC), marking both a religious and democratic reform in Sikh society. This movement was both religious and political, deeply intertwined with the Akali movement and the broader Indian nationalist struggle. The 20th century also witnessed the rise of women's reform movements independent of male reformers. All India Women's Conference 1927 emerged as a powerful platform advocating for education, property rights, marriage reform, and political representation. Women leaders like Sarojini Naidu, Kamaladevi Chattopadhyay, Hansa Mehta, and Muthulakshmi Reddy combined feminist goals with national freedom, demanding equality in the public sphere. Significantly, the social reform agenda in the 20th century moved from elite urban spaces to the rural and caste-based grassroots, bringing about mass consciousness. Education became a central strategy, alongside political assertion, religious reinterpretation, and legal reform. These movements built the moral and structural foundations for post-independence India's constitutional values of equality, liberty, and dignity. Thus, 20th century social and religious reform was not just a continuation of 19th century awakening but a deepening and democratization of reform, fueled by anti-colonial politics, caste resistance, gender activism, and spiritual realignments. It created new frameworks of identity, dignity, and justice that were integral to both India's national movement and its nation-building project after 1947. Previous year caste questions. Compare the approaches of Gandhi and Ambedkar towards the upliftment of Dalits. Caste 2020. Answer. Gandhi emphasized reform within Hinduism through moral appeal, calling Dalits, Harijans, and promoting integration. Ambedkar rejected Hinduism as oppressive and advocated for legal, political, and religious exit through conversion. Gandhi sought harmony, Ambedkar demanded structural change. Evaluate the significance of the self-respect movement in the social transformation of South India. Caste 2019. Answer. Led by Periyar, the self-respect movement challenged caste and gender hierarchy, promoted rationalism and secularism, and laid the foundation for affirmative policies and Dravidian politics. It significantly empowered backward castes and reshaped Tamil society. Discuss the role of Vaikom Satyagraha in Kerala's social reform movement. Caste 2021. Answer. Vaikom Satyagraha was a temple entry movement for backward castes. It marked a turning point in Kerala's social equality struggle, gaining national support, especially from Gandhi. It inspired similar agitations and led to the Travancore Temple Entry Proclamation. Ready for the next topic? I can proceed with post-independence India, freedom movement in Kerala, or whichever theme you choose next. Here is a complete, high-density lecture on India after independence 1947 onwards. The moment India achieved independence on the 15th of August 1947, it entered a phase of unprecedented challenges and monumental nation-building. The new state had to manage the trauma of partition, ensure national integration, build a democratic political system, frame a constitution, and launch a plan for socio-economic development. These tasks were carried out under visionary leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and many others who laid the foundations of the Indian Republic. One of the first and most complex challenges was partition and its aftermath. Over 10 million people were displaced, and nearly 1 million were killed in communal riots. The government, under Nehru and Patel, had to manage refugee resettlement, communal harmony, and law and order. The division of assets with Pakistan, formation of two dominions, and communal tensions made this an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Gandhi's assassination in 1948 was a blow to India's moral core, highlighting the rising intensity of communal hatred. Simultaneously, national integration required the accession of over 560 princely states. Through diplomacy, pressure, and in some cases military action, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, as India's first Home Minister, ensured the integration of almost all states into the Indian Union. Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Kashmir posed special problems. Junagadh, a Muslim-ruled state with a Hindu population, was annexed after a plebiscite. Hyderabad, under the Nizam, was brought into the Union through Operation Polo in 1948. The most complex was Jammu and Kashmir, where the instrument of accession signed by Maharaja Hari Singh in 1947, following tribal invasion from Pakistan, made it part of India.